tonight is a very short one and a greatly pleasurable one. I introduce Bill Lewis, President of the Met, who will introduce our principal speaker. Bill, if you would come forward, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill. As somebody says, that's the most recent of my introductions. Welcome to the Met, to this inaugural Hermitage lecture. We're proud to be the venue of this event because the Hermitage has one of the most important art collections in the world, because the Met has had a long and close relationship with this particular institution, and because since the opening up of Russia, the Metropolitan Hermitage have established an even closer and special exchange of professional staffs. The Hermitage is a splendid and important institution that stands with the Louvre, the Met, and very few other museums in its strength and breadth of its work, collection, and the professionalism of its staff. The logic that this lecture should be here is compelling. It's also a personal honor for me as well because of my admiration for the Piotrovskys, who have guided successfully and brilliantly the Hermitage through difficult years. I first met director Boris Piotrovsky in 1963, when I was a diplomat in Moscow. I sat with the American painter Richard Diebenkorn in Boris Piotrovsky's office again on October 16, 1964, the morning we learned that Nikita Khrushchev had stepped down as Soviet Party leader. The elegant director's office of the Hermitage, some of you have been there, was tense. Diebenkorn was anxious to see the rich Matisse collection, much of which was in storage, and he wouldn't take his mind off that purpose. Indeed, he'd come as an exchangee, the first painter to be under the exchange program with the Soviet Union in those early years of cultural exchanges, principally because he thought it would get him to the Hermitage to see these wonderful paintings. Dick didn't care much about Khrushchev one way or the other and was thinking about Matisse. Meanwhile, Boris Piotrovsky was quite concerned about his future, the future of the Hermitage, and the future of the very important context of the West, and whether in fact Khrushchev was actually sick, as the newspaper had said that morning, or whether there was something more going on. So here I, the diplomat, was trying to satisfy the wishes of my friend Dick while responding to the concerns of the director. As you all know, it turned out quite well. Dick Diebenkorn saw his Matisses, returned to California, painted within 2 years a painting called Homage to Matisse, drawn from those visual experiences that he had at the Hermitage. And that painting was the transitional painting to the beginning of the Ocean Park series, which marked Richard Diebenkorn as one of the finest American painters of our generation. Meanwhile, Boris Piotrovsky directed the Hermitage for 26 years, surviving the leadership of Brezhnev, Andropov, Chernenko, and Gorbachev, and managed to take the Hermitage through the Cold War to preserve and strengthen its collection and its staff. His son, Mikhail Borisovich Piotrovsky, became director in 1992. He's the classic example of the right man in the right job at the precisely right time. He has brought his distinguished name and tradition to an institution in great need of continuity, and he's brought more. A graduate of Leningrad University and a specialist in Islamic culture, Mikhail Borisovich has a doctorate in history and science. He speaks Russian and French, German, Arabic, and of course you'll know excellent English. At the same time, he brings a new urbanity, international perspective, and an open approach to ideas that has enabled the Hermitage to be one of the Russian institutions most adept at adjusting to dramatic changes underway in that society today. The sheer variety and scale of the physical, political, and psychological, never mind financial challenges that country is facing would throw most of us into disarray and depression. But let me declare Despite what you read in the press, today's Hermitage, with all its needs and challenges, remains one of the strongest, most important museums in the world, in no small part due to our good friend and its distinguished director, Mikhail Piotrovsky.
Well, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. Well, it was a little bit too much. Well, difficult to speak after all these wonderful words. But, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming here and to giving part of your time to listen about Hermitage and what we are doing and what we are planning to do. I'm very grateful for American friends for what American friends are doing for Hermitage, and I hope will do for many and many years. And I'm extremely grateful for the Met, which is really, well, for us Met is one of the small family of great museums where we feel ourselves always at home. And I see now 3 or 4 distinguished members of my staff, of our staff here in the Met, and we have a pleasure, and we always have a pleasure to meet people from this great museum in Hermitage, and we have a lot of plans of working together. The title of my lecture is Hermitage in the 21st century, or something like that. There is another title, which is the Super Museum in the time of decline of an empire. Because Hermitage, like Met, Louvre, and British Museum, is one of the super museums. There is another name used in smaller museums, monster museums, too big museums. These are museums which really are symbols of certain period, of certain great states, and this is also ideological importance of this kind of museums. And for a museum like Hermitage, what is going now in Russia is not, well, revolution, counter-revolution, democratization, opening. No, it is just a decline of Russian Empire, and the second one. We have lived through 2. One was at the beginning of the century, another one is going on now. It's a historical event, it's nothing to talk about, it's good or bad, it's just how it happens, and it has some big influence on the museum. The museums have to live through this. We know the history, how the Louvre after Napoleon lived through the decline of Napoleonic Empire. We know the wonderful example of how British museums survived the decline of British Empire, and still the great institution with new challenges. Also, still they, like us, must answer for the questions, when will the Elgin marbles come back? We have the Thyfian gold found in Crimea, asked by Ukrainians. Anyway, we have a lot of new challenges for the museum, which is a very special museum, very special for Russia. All great museums are symbols for their nations, but Hermitage is even more symbolic for Russia, and that's what we are trying to explain to our new rulers who don't understand it sometimes. And that's what is all about, all our protests of the last 2 or 3 weeks. We want people the government to understand that museums, not only our museum, are symbols of the health of the nation, and are much more important than economics or army or all other things. I hope we manage to bring some of our ideas to our rulers, and we'll do it more and more. Anyway, Hermitage is also, well, and it's not for nothing that Hermitage is made now under the personal patronage of the President of Russia, which was done this year, and I think it is the only museum in the world which has such a title. But it's really a museum which is a museum with big collections. At the same time, it's a palace, the royal palace, the palace which was the main palace of Russian Empire over the St. Petersburg period, which begins with Peter the Great and ends with Nicholas II. And in this museum we not only go from Rembrandts to Matisses and from Matisses to Watteaus, but we also go from the main throne of Russian Empire to the room where Alexander II was dying after the bomb attack on him, and we go through the rooms where Catherine the Great lived, and all these ghosts of our history, of our great history, do live in the museum, and that's extremely important. That's what makes this museum unique. I think most of you have been in our museum, and you know this feeling. And it's a great challenge because one of our main tasks is a big reconstruction. Every big museum goes through reconstruction at the end of the 20th century, and we have to do a lot of things to make museum more comfortable, but the main thing is to keep all these spirits, to keep the spirit of the museum, to keep it very special aspects, even with all the reconstruction and modernizations. One of our friends said that to explain what is Hermitage, you take the Louvre and put it into Versailles, and you'll understand all the problems. And it's absolutely right if you speak about the problems, because we have a great collection in the rooms which are not exactly very suitable for the millions of people who visit the collection. And Hermitage in all his history has different features which are very special to Hermitage, which have been working during all his history in different forms, and they do exist, and we want them to stay with us, the characteristical features of the museum. But first, let me show you some slides. You have seen all of this, but I'll talk and show you some things to remind the Hermitage, about the Hermitage. Sure, you know this Winter Palace, and you know this painter from Fife and Gold, and you can buy this in Metropolitan shop. Well, this is another view of the Winter Palace, and Winter Palace was a place where Catherine the Great lived when she became the empress. Also, it was built for Elizabeth, and here she established her small private museum in the place called Hermitage, which was a place for unofficial meetings. And with Catherine the Great, we can speak about one of the Hermitage traditions, which I hope will survive forever. It's a very aggressive museum. Catherine was buying big collections from all over the world, and she loved art, but she also knew that if you are victorious, and she was victorious on the fields of war, and she was the first who made Russia a great power. She also knew that how you arrange your triumph is as important as how you have got your victory on the field of battles. And part of this triumph had been collections which she was buying with big scandals from France and Britain and Germany. So one building, another building, 3, 4 buildings became the buildings for this museum called Hermitage. It's called Hermitage, which is, as you know, the place where Hammett lives, a place of isolation. And still with 2 million visitors visiting Hermitage, it have been also 3 million and 4 million before, still it is a place where you can feel yourself isolated from the street and all the problems of the street, and this is another feature which we try to keep together with this aggressiveness. After Catherine the Great, one of great stories of our collecting was Alexander I, when he has bought big collection from Empress Josephine in Paris. It's a very interesting story. It's very much connected with the story of France defending their trophies, war trophies, after the defeat. And Alexander bought a collection which was a Josephine collection, which partly came from Kassel, from collection of Markgraf of Hessen. And when the representative of Markgraf of Hessen came to Josephine after being in the Louvre and taking from the Louvre part of Kassel collection, they had been told just yesterday it was all being bought by the Tsar of Russia. And this collection is still with us. During the First World War, these paintings, something like 15, have been the first to be evacuated when the Germans have been near St. Petersburg. and it's an old story. I'll now, in 2 weeks, I presented a paper, and I will present a paper now, a scientific conference about the history of fight around this collection and the trophy art. So we have a long history of trophy art in Hermitage. Then if we come to the time of revolution, we can once more speak about aggressiveness of Hermitage, because Hermitage really became a great museum with different departments after the revolution, when a lot of private collections have been nationalized. They have been nationalized and taken into museum foundation, and then Hermitage has worked a lot to take part of them to the museum, and so they have been saved, because all others have been given to small museums have been sold abroad. Well, you know, also some part of Hermitage has been sold by the Soviet government, but still a lot of it survived, and well, still we don't have anything to sell more, but we survived. Here you have the oldest carpet in the world, found in the excavation of Pazarik. It's dated from the 6th century BC, and the next oldest carpet is dated on the 12th century AD. The Hermitage also is famous for its possibility for survival. You see, we have been evacuated 3 times. First, when Napoleon came, then in the First World War, and this is a very terrible evacuation because it was to Moscow. And after the war there was a revolution and the capital moved to Moscow, and the rulers of cultural life in Moscow decided that they must have a big museum in Moscow, and it will be better to keep all the Hermitage treasures in Moscow. So it took 3 or 4 years of very hard fighting to get these collections back. Well, then there was Second World War, once more evacuation of 2/3 of Hermitage, and 1/3 stayed in the museum. It was really one of the most difficult times, which we always remember when we some days, well, nowadays we are talking about, oh, it's very difficult, it's so difficult, it's awful, it's a tragedy. We always must remember the days of the war when there was a question of existence or non-existence of the museum. We survived. The museum survived several fires. There was a famous fire in the Winter Palace. We have here the main staircase on the Winter Palace. In 1837, all the interiors of Winter Palace have been burned. The Hermitage, the doors to the Hermitage have been closed by brick walls quickly, so all the collections survived. Then we had a revolution. The same thing, there was a storming of Winter Palace, and well, the storming was quite symbolic, but still there was a plundering in the palace, but nothing in the museum, because also before the storming there have been guards and forces have been put into Hermitage just to keep it from the crowds, just in case. That's one of our beautiful masterpieces, the Venice of Taurida, which was bought by Peter the Great. Part of the Fifian gold also was bought by Peter the Great, the man whose name is always mentioned in St. Petersburg, maybe even more than it is needed. Sometimes people became tired, but nothing to do. Everything begins with Peter. Even in Hermitage, also Hermitage was founded by Catherine. Well, now we also have the problem of survival. This is the small throne room with the throne of Russian Tsars and the portrait of Peter the Great once more, I'm sorry. Nowadays, in the end of the 20th century, we live in a period when, as I told you, we live second time through the period of decline of an empire. And what are the features of the decline? First, everybody wants to take something from your collections. It was in the 1917, it's the same thing it's now. In the 1917, the director of Hermitage, Count Tolstoy, remembered that he has 2 big problems just after the storming of the Winter Palace. One was the cellars of Hermitage. In the cellars of Hermitage were the best collection, the big collection of wines of the Tsars. And everybody in St. Petersburg knew, all the revolutionary soldiers and sailors knew that there is a lot of wine there. So they tried to get into these cellars, and there was a problem. You can't evacuate it because it will be attacked. You can't keep guard because everybody, at every night, people try to get into it. And so they made a revolutionary decision. They just break all the bottles, and for a day, as it is said, the small channel near Hermitage was red from red wine and not from blood. Another problem was that the second day man came to him with some paper from Lenin telling that all the things which have been found in Ukraine must go back to Ukraine because in all these terrible years of Tsarist regime, everything has been taken to Hermitage, now it must go back. Well, we have the same things today. There was even an agreement signed in Minsk by the chiefs of the independent states that everything must go to the place where it has been found or has been some time, which is rather ridiculous because most of the independent states never existed, nor in the 19th century, nor in the 20th century, until the Soviet Union declined and collapsed. But it was not ratified by the parliament, so there is no legal obligation. Well, we have a very good, but not a very well, joyful answer for this. We have materials in Hermitage, long list of things which have been given in the 20s to Ukraine, mostly archaeological objects of gold and silver found in the land which now is called Ukraine. And the story that mostly all of these things are tens of thousands of objects don't exist nowadays. They have been taken to Ukraine to different small museums, then there was the war and this and that, and so they just don't exist. There was another thing in in the 20s, a lot of pictures have been given to different museums of Russia. One of them, Pushkin Museum in Moscow, 400 old masters' paintings went there. Well, we say now we are even because we have got Shukin and Morozov, part of Shukin and Morozov collection from Moscow as kind of, not exactly exchange, but a compensation. So we are even. But at the same time, and then the next step was that the government began to sell pictures from Hermitage. It was a sorrowful story. Well, now it is history. Still, we consider it was a crime from the side of Soviet government because things have been sold not to keep the culture, not for the museums, but just for some political needs. Already, also well, I think Bill Murray once told me that we must make a big map of Hermitage and all the museums which have pictures from Hermitage. We are preparing the map. It will be a very big map because there is some Tiepolo in Melbourne and so on. There are some pictures in Met. So, well, they're in good hands, thank God. Still, some of the things appear on the auctions. They're in good hands, and so history is history. So we are not demanding anything back. We are not demanding anything back, but we are not giving anything what we have in our collections also. Well, here we see the military gallery of the Winter Palace with the portrait of Alexander I and Kutuzov, who was the organizer of our victory on Napoleon. This is one of the whole of coat of arms. We have the coat of arms of all Russian districts of Russia. They're on the chandeliers. Now we are returning to the old coats of arms and old traditions. So some of republics have some old symbols, and 2-3 months ago we had the president of Tatarstan here, and he came here and said, oh, where is the old coat of arms of Kazan of Tatarstan? We didn't know, and he said, I am not going out until I find it. And he found it. There's the last chandelier, the third one, there is the coat of crest of Kazan. Well, this is the main throne of the main hall of Winter Palace, the St. George Hall, where in the middle there was the throne place of Russia. We are planning to restore it. Well, when we speak about sponsors, it's always everybody's asking us, well, what about Russian sponsors? There's so much money in Russia. Sure, for us, it will cost a lot to restore this throne place, and still some amount of money. We decided that for this we can't have any foreign sponsor. We must have a Russian sponsor. So we are still looking for them for a year and a half. Nobody wants, and so I think we even collected money for ourselves, and we have it in Hermitage to do the restoration, but no Russian sponsor from all these banks. And so, well, different examples of the collection. It's part of our Harahoda collection, the Buddhist icons from Harahoda. Well, these are a lot of archaeological found. These are returns from the ivory returns of Parthian work found in Turkmenistan. These are the murals from Penjiki and from Central Asia found by Hermitage expeditions. This is the one of the hall, the Field Marshal's Hall. And this is Nikolaevsky Hall with exhibition about Nikolaus and Alexandra. It's the main hall when we make exhibition. We think that in our plans of reconstruction, big plans, we think to restore the historical interiors of the big state rooms, which we use usually for exhibitions, which is a good idea because these halls are beautiful without any exhibition. But there is another side. Every exhibition looks twice beautiful in these halls than in any others. So we have to decide for the St. George Hall there is a decision, very strong decision, no more exhibitions. But it was a decision of 2 years. Then there was exhibition of Peter the Great. And well, Peter the Great has his rights to have his exhibition about him in the throne. Next year we have planned exhibition to the history of Russia, coats of arms of Russia, this double-headed eagle. Well, sure, St. George Hall is the most suitable place for it. But still, well, these are the contradictions of modern life. This is one of the exhibitions of interior, historical Russian interior. And this is part of our famous collection of ancient Iranian Sasanian silver. Well, this is the famous Malachite room, also historical, the room when the provisional government had his last meetings during the 1917's revolution. This is part of our big collection of icons. Most of the icons which we have in our collection have been found in 50s and 60s in the churches which have been destroyed or just empty in the north of Russia and restored and saved by our restorers. Well, this is a corridor of ministers, always part of our collection of tapestry. It's part of the church of the Winter Palace, beautiful ceiling, and part of our collection, another collection of icons. Madonna Benois by Leonardo da Vinci. Well, it's a picture which was found, bought in Russia from some traveling musician and storytellers. And we have a lot of discussion nowadays in Russia about the private collections and how to, what is the relation between the big museums and private collectors. And the main idea is, and it is realized in Moscow, to make museums of private collections. A big museum where you have just one floor for one collection, another. I think that the private collections must go into a museum and must be rearranged according to the ideas of the museum. And I'm using this Madonna Benois. I'm saying it doesn't mean I'm right, but I'm saying, well, we have in St. Petersburg whole museum of the history of family of Benois. Benois family is a very famous family of Russian artists, art historians and so on. Peter Ustinov comes from this family. They have a museum called Benois Museum, and we have in Hermitage a picture which comes from the Benois family. I think that for the posterity, for the fame of the name Benois, the greatest masterpiece of Hermitage called Madonna Benois is more important than a small museum in Peterhof, which some people visit, a nice museum, but still I think having a picture in Hermitage is better. Well, it is open to discussions. Well, it's another Leonardo da Vinci Madonna Lita, and it's a Rotonda hall which we use mostly for exhibitions of antiques, coins and medals and so on. Well, one of the most beautiful things in Hermitage are the doors, and these doors also are part of our biggest headache, because, well, nowadays days are changing and people don't feel anything, don't have anything holy in their life, and so there are a lot of people who want to catch something from Hermitage, to take some small piece of bronze, and especially from the doors. So we have to restore them permanently and try to catch the people's bugs. Well, this is the building of small Hermitage. It's exactly the place where Catherine established her small museum. This building is in the worst condition because, well, all our buildings are old, and you have been in St. Petersburg, you know that our climate is not exactly the best climate for the plastered facades of this Italian-style building. So now we are restoring the facade, but in our big reconstruction plan, this is the third stage. The first stage was the reconstruction of the building of Hermitage Theatre, when we have now a beautiful theatre which is working, and it's one of the most prestigious places in St. Petersburg. Then we have built, and we are close to finish, big storage facilities outside of the center of the city, and then we have to restore this building of small Hermitage, this beautiful hall which is called Pavilion Hall. This is our beautiful Giorgione, Judith of Giorgione, one of the also example of restoration, of the kind of restoration which we are doing in Hermitage. It took many years to restore and to clean it very carefully, and our specialty is we don't over clean, or we don't clean enough the pictures. We just have been talking with Mr. Montebello, Philip, how that we didn't clean our Tiapolos. We did clean them, but we didn't over clean them for the exhibition. And the same thing, our pictures look always a little bit darker than pictures in London. Well, like in Metropolitan, because your pictures are also dark enough. So we are also careful. It's a big problem, and we are rather proud with our school of restorers, who are very careful, very traditional, very conservative. Building of new Hermitage, and here we have a small bridge like in Venice, taking us to the part of the new Hermitage and the Hermitage Theatre. This new Hermitage building with this entrance, which is used by presidents and kings when they visit Hermitage. It's part of the new Hermitage building, which was built at the time of Nicholas I, the Tsar, who was a very special figure for our history. He was one of the most reactionary Tsars in Russia, but he was the one who made Hermitage public museum, opening to the public in 1852, and he built, or ordered to build this building, he brought architect Leo von Klenze, the one who built museums in Munich, to build this new Hermitage building. You must have a look. There is a statue which is now taken down. It's one of our problems of the 19th century coming into the 20th century. In the 19th century they have invented a new material made of zinc, of different kind of metals, which was very good for making sculptures, easy to make sculptures. And nowadays all these sculptures made of this spiater are just, well, going into dust. They're becoming dust, and we don't know exactly what to do with them. We have a special laboratory which is trying to invent ways of restoring it, and there is a Leonardo da Vinci which has been taken down to the restoration lab. And this is the staircase of New Hermitage, built in the time of Nicholas. As I told you, Nicholas was, well, he was the first who built the museum, and then he decided that not every picture is good for the museum, and he himself divided the pictures into three categories. The first for exhibition, another for reserves, and the third category was sold by his orders. Thank God he was selling it inside Russia, so after several years Hermitage has bought them back, a big part of them. So at the same time, Nicholas was the one who, just with his personal taste, was buying for his personal rooms pictures of Caspar David Friedrich, this wonderful German painter who was at this time famous only in Germany. And so thanks to Nicholas we have the best Friedrich's collection outside Germany. So all our tsars have been quite complicated personalities. And this is Hermitage built by Klenze, rooms in historical style and neo-Greek style. And these interiors are also some of great masterpieces of Hermitage, and some people come to St. Petersburg to see just Klenze's buildings because what there is now in Munich has been partly destroyed, partly burned during the war. Well, this is Titian's Saint Sebastian, one of the pictures which do not travel. We traveled once to Venice to a big exhibition of Titian, and after that we will never travel because the results have been not very good. Well, this is another part of our Greek and Roman exhibition, and this is Rembrandt. We have a nice collection of Rembrandts, and well, most of them, even with all the critics which is going on, still are considered to be good Rembrandts. Even outside Hermitage. For us in Hermitage, they are all good Rembrandts. Well, this is a big collection of Marquise Campana, Italian collector, which was bought in the second part of the 19th century. This sculpture of Zeus is very big, so it stayed during the war in Hermitage without being moved. Well, another Rembrandt for the family, and one of our Italian rooms, which is now under restoration. We are changing the skylights, and we are trying to put some new lighting equipment. Well, see, lighting is a big problem for Hermitage, as for every museum, and we are trying to find different ways of lighting, and the problem is we have to have light on the pictures and on the interiors also, so we have special plans for every interior. And exactly today we have a big event in Hermitage connected with lighting. The Minister of Foreign Trade of Canada is announcing a Canadian gift to Hermitage. They're giving $100,000 to buy the films which will be put on the windows to protect the pictures from the ultraviolet light, which is very important for Hermitage because, as you know, have a lot of windows. It's the style of the museum. Well, our Dutch paintings and Rembrandt's Prodigal Son. I had a pleasure, one of the last pleasures in front of this picture I had several months ago when President Clinton visited Hermitage, and we spent quite a lot of time here speaking about the picture, and I have been astonished that he even has seen the last books written about the theological meaning of this picture. After that, I used the President Clinton's visit to get our president to Hermitage, and we succeeded to bring our president. And there are two things. Clinton has been here and stayed more than it was in the protocol, and another thing, it was really Yeltsin was the first person in Russia who visited Hermitage after 1917 in his official capacity. No Stalin, no Lenin, no Brezhnev, no Gorbachev, nobody never visited official Hermitage. Certainly they have been in the museum, but in a way St. Petersburg and Hermitage, the Royal Palace, was not a place which they wanted to go first when they come to the city. Well, it's part of the decoration of the Hermitage with portraits of painters and sculptors of Russia, and here's the portrait of Klenze himself in the building built by him. So he also put his own, the architect put his own, not only signature but also his portrait. Well, this is the building of Hermitage Theatre, one of our buildings for where you go through the bridge, and this is the Hermitage Theatre. I think that many of those who are here have had a pleasure to be in the theatre. If not, you must look forward to be there. It's a beautiful theatre from the time of Catherine. Very democratic, as you see. There is no special place for the Tsarina. And, well, full of symbols of Russian Empire which have been covered for 70 years by another paint, but have been then cleaned. It's another kind of restoration, to clean royal insignia. This is Menshikov Palace. It's a branch of Hermitage on another bank of Neva. Palace built by in the time of Peter by one of his main officers who was the governor of St. Petersburg. This is Rubens, Perseus and Andromede. This is Caspar David Friedrich, one of the several pictures which we do have. And this is famous Fabergé. You have the regalia of Russian Empire. Well, the copies, small copies of crown and big crown and small crown. The main crown jewelry has been taken during the revolution or during the war to Moscow, and it stayed to Moscow. It wasn't part of the museum collection, so it stayed in Moscow. It's now in the diamond found in Kremlin. And here we have our collection of modern art. Renoir, Van Dongen, Matisse. Well, Renoir, Van Dongen come from the collection of Shukin and Marov, these famous Moscow collectors who made this fantastic collection. This is a gift given by the lady whose portrait it is. It's Mrs. Delektorsky, who was Matisse's secretary, and she presented to Hermitage and Pushkin Museum several things, paintings and sculptures by Matisse. And she tells a story when once she was going from Paris through customs with one of these paintings, maybe this one, and she was asked, "What is it?" She said, "It's my portrait." Oh, okay, so nobody thought about Matisse being taken out from... Well, Picasso. Another Picasso. This one also doesn't travel, so it wasn't on the exhibition in London. And this is Matisse music. It was made as a pair to the famous Matisse dance, also for Shukin. Matisse dance was presented also on the exhibition on Atlanta, and you know, Hermitage is, St. Petersburg wants to get the Olympic Games into St. Petersburg. Well, I'm not sure we need them, but anyway, we went to Atlanta, and I was taken as a part of the delegation to speak with the members of the Olympic Committee and to explain that they must come to St. Petersburg. And the only thing I could say that, well, you have seen the dance, and there is also music which never travels, so if you want to see them, you must come to St. Petersburg with the Olympic Games. I don't know if we'll succeed. Well, here's the view of the square. You have the Winter Palace there, and then opposite the Winter Square we have the building which is called the... I'm sorry, it's wrong way. But still, well, kind of a riddle. You can understand where it is. It must be another way. But we have the General Staff building, which is partly with the military. That part of it is given to us. We'll make a Museum of Applied Arts there. But our dream is to make all this part of Hermitage, all the square, to get military out from here and out from here. It is difficult, but we already succeeded. We have got half of permission to make a tunnel which will go under from the new Hermitage building under this building where we have the military headquarters to the building of the general staff. So there are some hopes, and we call it big Hermitage. We have the plan of big Hermitage like Grand Louvre, and there is another big Hermitage which will take some time, but it all will depend on money and political situations with the military. During the restoration of the building of Hermitage Theatre, we have found the remains of the Winter Palace of Peter the Great, and so there is a new exhibition there. We have restored, it's inside the building, under the stage of the theatre. We have restored it, and there is a gallery to memory of Peter with this famous sculpture of Peter which was done right after his death, from the mask taken from his face, and with some restoration of rooms where Peter lived. And there is, you see the bottle, there is a bottle. This bottle full of wine was found during the excavations, so it is a very historical bottle from the time of Peter. Well, this is another Matisse, one of the best Matisses, the Moroccan Café. And this is our Kandinsky, composition number 6. It has been here last year. Well, and this is famous picture and famous tragedy of Hermitage. This is Danae by Rembrandt. 10 years ago it was attacked by a crazy man with acid and knife. It took 10 years to restore it. This is how it is now. It's not the old Danae. One can discuss 1/5 or 1/3 of it is gone, but still our restorers managed to conserve it, and we are planning to have now. Nothing could be done more than has been done, so we are planning to launch an exhibition next year. Well, this is the building of the small Hermitage, a computer picture of what we want to do with it, because in the ground floor of this building there are the old stables and old manege, which now are used as the storage for carriages and furniture. We'll move them out to the new storage facilities, and we will have here, you have this just computer pictures of places which will be used for temporary exhibitions. Well, another example of our work of our restorers, it comes from excavations on the Black Sea. A picture what has been found in small fragments on the wall during the excavations on the wall of a Greek temple there. That's a picture of Egyptian ship coming to the Black Sea ports. Well, this is how we plan to cover some of the inner yards of the General Staff building. This is another example of restoration, the throne and the crest of Russian Empire. This one which was on the throne place in the St. George Hall. It was restored by our restorers, and it was standing in the hall when President visited Hermitage, and in St. George Hall he signed an agreement between Moscow and St. Petersburg, well, central government and St. Petersburg, having behind him not the new but the old and original one, symbol of Russian state. Well, this is one of the pictures we have recently got to Hermitage. It was found in one of the buildings of St. Petersburg, cleaned. It's Eteval, Lot and his daughters. Wonderful picture. There is another version of it in Los Angeles County Museum. Ours is much better, as you can imagine. Well, this is just a picture of restoration, reparation going on in the big Italian halls. And these are some pictures of the war. Sure, it was prohibited to take any photos during the war. These are drawings of the cellars of Hermitage, which have been used for people with Hermitage staff and all other people, cultural people from the cultural elite of St. Petersburg. They lived here in these cellars during the war. And these are the picture of the rooms during the war. The frames stayed on their place, and there was some surrealistic stories of what was going on during the war. Sometimes soldiers or sailors have been coming to Hermitage during the siege, and they have been taken through the rooms, and they have been told about the pictures which have been in these frames and will return to these frames. Well, you can call it education or absolutely mystical things, but people do remember this. I think it was quite a great thing. This is a storage of carriages which stayed during the war in the museum, and this storage was hit by a bomb, and several carriages have been badly damaged. Also, I think those who have been in Hermitage have seen the big carriage of Catherine the Great, which stands in the Field Marshal's Hall. It was exactly one of those which have been damaged, and it was recently restored with the help of the people of Memphis, Tennessee, where then it was taken for the exhibition about Catherine. Well, connected with the war, the problem of trophy art, which I think has been written and talked a lot. This is the famous Degas from Gerstenberg collection, which is in Hermitage, but is not part of Hermitage collection. It is a part of, subject of discussions for lawyers and politicians. Well, at least what we have done, we have shown it, and everybody can come and see it, and then, we'll see what will happen. In the small Hermitage, we have this hanging garden, which is beautiful, but the problem is nobody can go out there with our climate of rain and snow and so on. So we have some plans to cover it with glass roof, which will be a roof which can be opened or closed. Still there is a controversy going on, there is a lot of discussions. I am not sure we'll do such a thing, but there is a plan of this. And then just for dessert, some examples of what we will show in our exhibition. Well, this is Leonardo da Vinci, which is restored and taken down. Here are the things which will be shown in our exhibition, next exhibition of displaced art, art taken from Germany, which will be open on December 3rd. These are pictures from the same private collections. These are Goya's drawing from Gerstenberg collection, from the Bordeaux album. Goya. I'm sorry, it's my fault, but we'll change it to Thomas Rollinson and Daumier. This is all from Gerstenberg's. Delacroix, Toulouse-Lautrec, Signac from Krebs collection, Van Gogh. It will be on the cover of the catalog, which I have seen the proofs today. It's published as the first catalog together with Abrams. Nolde, Archipenko, so 89 drawings and watercolors. Well, upside down, but you can imagine it's Hermitage. It's Hermitage, the Winter Palace. That's all. I hope that at least the pictures have been good enough. And thank you very much. And while going to the 21st century, we are trying to keep all this in good shape. We are trying to develop this, and the big Hermitage will be much better than the old one, with all the good things remaining like they have been for the century. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. There are buses in front of the Met that will take you to our dinner at the Russian consulate on 91st Street, and we appreciate your coming. We hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I did, and let's all thank Mr. Piotrovsky for coming this long way in his busy schedule. And thank you, Bill Lewis, for letting us use the Met.